for this session, the KS Basu Trust, Professor Ravi Dhingra. I welcome you all, and dear students, I welcome you all to this very happy occasion of the KS Basu Memorial Lecture on lessons in leadership in a turbulent world by none other than Mr. Harish Manwani, who will hopefully enlighten us with his entire global experience on how the world has been coping and what's the way forward. This session has been jointly organized by BMA in association with the Dr KS Basu Trust. And I, on behalf of BMA, am very pleased to announce that we have association with the KS Basu Trust to bring every year a memorial lecture from some of the most enlightened management educators across the world. The KS Basu Trust has also partnered with BMA in a range of activities, including the Lifetime Achievement Award for Corporate Leadership, starting this year. They have been generous enough to support the BMA Association, both in terms of inputs as well as financially. BMA, as all of us know, is the oldest management association in India. It has a legacy of 67 years old, and as it would be, one of the founder members is Dr. KS Basu, who also happens to be the past president of BMA. And we are lucky today to actually be able to celebrate and bring his thoughts. In fact, many people attending today have been students of Dr. KS Basu, and we thank Professor Ravi Dhingra for this opportunity to BMA, and we also thank Mr. Ernest Fernandez for bringing this cohesion together. With these few words, I would request Professor Ravi Dhingra to quickly give us his welcome address as the trustee of the KS Basu Trust. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav, and good evening, everyone. The trustees of the Dr. KS Basu Memorial Trust are delighted to partner with the BMA on the second annual memorial lecture to honor the memory and legacy of a transformational figure and a leading Indian management thinker. Dr. Basu is regarded as one of the fathers of modern Indian management education. He was also a boardroom director, an advisor, and institution builder in 20th century India. As many of you may know, from humble beginnings as a medical doctor practicing in pre-partition Punjab, he went on to become the personnel director and one of the first Indians to be appointed to the board of Hindustan Unilever. He was an institution builder as the founding director of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management in 1966 and was co-founder of the Bombay Management Association and its second president from 61 to 64. He was also president of the All India Management Association in the 60s, as well as president of the National Institute of Personnel Management, the Bombay Productivity Council, as well as the Asian Association of Management Organizations. He was a very colorful and visionary leader and educator who inspired and mentored a whole generation of students, some of who are here with us today in our virtual audience, who have made their mark as CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industrialists in India and indeed around the world. by the 70s, he had become an internationally recognized management educator and practitioner, lecturing and advising around the world. Dr. Basu had a passion for Indianizing management training and practices. What does that mean? He was a very staunch advocate for developing a homegrown management model, as he called it, contextualizing management concepts and practices in the Indian setting. He wanted it to reflect Indian values and management style rather than merely adopting and transposing Western management models. He turned down, yes. He turned down the generous terms of collaboration.
Sorry.
He turned down the generous terms of collaboration provided by Stanford University, choosing instead to build an Indian management education institute from scratch, the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management. His model of management education also was quite interesting and unique at the time. He had only a small core of full-time faculty, relying instead on the talent and experience of distinguished corporate executives in Mumbai to bring their rich experience into the classroom and bridge the gap between theory and practice. This relationship building with industry helped create a very robust ecosystem that benefited both industry as well as the institute and its talented graduates. Has proved to be a very successful management education model. He nurtured the institute for 12 solid years, and after leaving as director in '77, he began his next innings, providing management counsel as board member, advisor, and mentor to a number of leading corporations and family-held businesses, mentoring on growth, governance, organizational design, in addition to holding international positions. Setting up these lectures in the memory of one of the doyens of Indian management education, in collaboration with the BMA, an institution that he co-founded, is a perfect way to honor his contribution to the field of management. My fellow trustees, including Mr. Fernandez, who is here with us today, and I thank the management team and for hosting this event. Thank you, Mr. Yadav and the entire team at BMA. The lecture today is very special for a couple of reasons. Having this memorial lecture under the auspices of the BMA is special because Dr. Basu was one of the co-founders of this august body. He would have been very honored that an organization that he helped establish 67 years ago is alive and well and flourishing and hosting this memorial lecture today. And it is befitting that we have as our keynote speaker today, Mr. Harish Manwani, a former student of Dr. Basu and an alumnus of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute. And Dr. Basu would have indeed been very proud of your accomplishments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ravi Dhingra. I think we have, in fact, there are a lot of students of Jamnalal Bajaj Institute today waiting in to listen from somebody who's actually been a student of Dr. KS Basu. I'm now going to request Dr. Anand Patkar, also an alumnus of the Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies, a very established management consultant, associated with BMA for 25 years, has done several training programs in financial management and earned handsome revenue for BMA to sustain it over the years. I'm going to request Dr. Anand Patkar to quickly introduce to us the speaker of the day.
Very much, Kiran Yadav. who's been a Bajaj past student in any case. I've had the honor of being associated with him. Professor Dhingra, uh, Harish Manwani, who's our special guest today. It's a special honor for me to be associated with this event to introduce the guest of honor and the speaker of the evening, because I have a long association with all the institutions mentioned over here, with the BMA, with the Bajaj Institute, and Manwani himself and Dr. Dhingra. Dr. Dhingra and Dr. Basu. Dr. Basu was my first teacher and guru, and I joined Bajaj Institute from a science background. I was expecting some kind of complex definition of management and how difficult it is and how it to be, you need to work hard and so on and so forth from the director. But Dr. Basu, in his own style, he says, management is the process of converting resources into results. So long as you keep associating, creating results, you're okay. And that's been a mantra for a long time, that forget everything else, he said, just produce results. And that's what management is all about. And it's a mantra, it's a learning that has stayed with us for a long time. Thank you, Kiran, for outlining my association with BMA. I won't go into that. With Bajaj Institute, I have a long association as a student first. It gave me my master's degree, my doctoral degree, my opportunity to interact with the later graduates as a teacher, visiting faculty, and currently on the academic board of the Institute. My association with the Institute, Bajaj Institute, also gave me an association with the speaker for this evening, Mr. Harish Manwani. Let me do the formal introduction first and do a little bit of a personal introduction also to follow that up. Mr. Manwani is currently the senior operating partner at Blackstone, which is the international investing firm, as we all know and heard a lot about it. He also serves on several boards of very well-known international companies, Gilead Sciences, Qualcomm, Whirlpool, our own Tata Sons, and EDBI of Singapore. He has been the chairman and the executive board. He is currently the executive board chairman of the Indian School of Business. He has previously served as a non-executive chairman of Unilever, but I'll come to that in a moment. He has been awarded the CNBC Asia Business Leader Award of 2008 and the Public Service Medal by the Singapore government in 2012. But I think all of us probably know of Mr. Manwani as Unilever, and for most of us, there's a kind of a one-to-one equation between Unilever and Harish Manwani. Harish spent I guess about 38 years with Unilever and joined as a management trainee and finished as the chief operating officer responsible for all international operations of HUL, of the most significant FMCG company in the world, probably. It has been an amazing journey for him, and we have been tracking it, and all of us are aware at different points. And he served as the chairman of Hindustan Unilever, HUL in India, for I think some 15 years or maybe a little less or more around that. So it's been an extremely rewarding career for him, an extremely high achievement oriented careers. And it's been great that Bajaj Institute is where he started, and that's where I met him for the first time. Not even before the institute started. If I remember right, he and I were in the same group discussion, which was for the admission to Bajaj, and his smart conversation at the group discussion, his quick wit and the smartness of analyzing the situation and presenting it, carrying everybody with him, convincing everybody about his point of view. I thought, apna to chance nahi milega of this kind of a competition. But the institute probably had good enough that they could select more than one person from a group. And then, of course, we were together for 2 years, 74 to 76. We learned a lot from the faculty, Dr. Basu included, but we spent a lot of time over chai in the canteen and all the addas around the institute and the hostel, long hours talking about everything under the sun, learning from each other, developing each other's personalities, I would say also, as much as we were being developed by the faculties who were teaching us at that point in time. Mr. Manwani, as you will have probably known, but even from that time, very quick in sizing up a situation, very quick in understanding personalities, very quick in making good stories around them in a way, but never in any way. But one of the important things I must say, never ever were his stories or his jokes or his wit was about demeaning any individual character. It's always about looking at it with the respect to the person concerned and just using that as a methodology of making communication and proving a point. And that's a very, very rare quality, which I think I've learned from him in many ways, and made sure that whatever we do, we remember that. We've been, of course, meeting over the years in different reunion meetings and personal family meetings and so on. We work together in the institute on common projects. I remember the time when in the canteen of Bajaj, Harish talking about Nimbu ki Tajgi wala soup, even before Levers came up with Lirel. And he had the concept, he had the idea, he had the visualization of a product with the Nimbu ki Tajgi at a time when we were yet students at the institute. He had great respect, of course, for Hindustan Lever at all points in time, in the college days in particular. As you all know, probably, that Lever's building in the headquarters in those days was just across the road from Bajaj Institute. So we just had to cross the road to get into Hindustan Lever. And he would be very, very reverential about crossing that road to get in. We had some projects in which we had to interact with executives from Lever who were very forthcoming in any case. He would refer to it as the temple of management, temple of marketing. I remember those words he used to call it the temple of management or the temple of marketing. And I think the best introduction that I can give you of Mr. Harish Manwani is that here is an example of an ardent devotee becoming the god inside the temple over the years of his career. A fantastic achievement indeed. And I'm sure we are all looking forward to hearing him speak more than anybody else. So I hand you over, Mr. Harish Manwani.
Thank you. Thank you, Anand. Firstly, I was just hoping that you stick to some of the formalities and don't give out any further things, because as they say, what happened in college remains in college. But on a lighter note, I do remember people often saying that you won't go far in life, so I just went across the street. So that was a little bit of background. But firstly, thank you very much, Anand. You've always been a good friend and a respected colleague, and I've always appreciated that. Thank you, Professor Dhingra, for introducing what was truly an icon of our generation, Dr. Basu. And thank you, Kiran, for inviting me to this event. It's a great honor and a privilege for me to be talking at the Dr. KS Basu Memorial Lecture. Dr. Basu was truly an icon of our times, and of course, for many of us, a guru and a teacher. And some of the things that he said, and Anand referred to quite a few of his incredibly insightful definitions of what business is all about, I have kept with me throughout my journey. I also had the good fortune, of course, of working in the company that he made his career and rose to be the director of that company. So in many ways, I really, really feel honored, privileged, and more importantly, truly humbled at what I have been requested to do today. So the subject that I've been told to talk on is lessons in leadership in a turbulent world. And I think the most important thing when you start talking about leadership is to understand the context in which we operate. Because without the context, frankly, nothing has really any relevance. And the best way to describe the context in which we operate today is a quote from Lenin during the 1917 Russian Revolution, when he said, "There are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen." And I think in many ways we live in that hugely unpredictable, or what I call the VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, where frankly, change, to use a cliche, is the only normal. And it is in this world that we have to manage businesses. And just when you think we were coming out of the financial crisis, we had the crisis of globalization, and when we were coming out of globalization, we have the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, And just when we thought we were coming out of that pandemic, we now have the Russian-Ukrainian conflict going on, which is disrupting a large part of the world. But at the end of the day, here is the good news. The good news is, as our Upanishads have said, the Sanskrit saying, neti, neti, neti. This too shall pass. This is not it. This is not it. This is not it. And this too shall pass. The bad news is this will be substituted by something else that we won't quite understand how to cope with. And that's exactly the world that we live in. But I just want to take all of us to a pre-COVID period, because in many ways, a lot of the underlying trends in the world were already being defined. And as we come out of the COVID pandemic, some of those mega trends, as I call it, have not changed. And in order to understand how to lead and how to manage, we have to really understand some of those mega trends. What are those? And I've picked out really 4. The first is the rise in inequality in the world. It's incredible that we now live in a world where a handful of people actually own most of the wealth in the world. Surely this cannot be, forget about inequity, this cannot be a world in equilibrium. The second bit is that we live in a very resource-stressed world, where basics like water, the air that we breathe, those are under severe scarcity. And I think we have to, as businesses, we have to learn to recognize that we have to manage our resources more efficiently. In fact, the fact of the matter is that if the developing world starts consuming like the developed world, we will need 3 planets. And I think I don't have to tell any of you listening to this that unfortunately we have only 1 planet. So we have a really serious issue of resources being stressed across the world in every single geography. The third big trend, which picked up, in fact, in the last 5 or 6 years, is the increasing rise in what I call tribalism. People retreating back into the communities, and a huge amount of mistrust against globalization. In many ways, the benefits of globalization were being overtaken by the sheer insecurity and mistrust of communities who believed that there was nothing here for them. And I think in many ways, the political leaders like President Trump represented that sentiment of bringing, if you like, tribalism or Trumpism in terms of mobilizing and galvanizing people. And finally, of course, the double-edged weapon of technology. On the one hand, technology has transformed the way we all live. It's made our life so different, whether it is work, entertainment. I mean, look at today's example. I mean, I'm here, there are, as a speaker, so many of you are participating from the different parts of the world, and we are all able to have a conversation. But on the other hand, it's also disrupting the very nature of work and redefining employment and employability. And that's what I call the double edge of technology. So that's the context. And that context hasn't changed. It was emerging pre-COVID, and it will be there as we come out of COVID, hopefully soon. And it is in this context that we need to discuss what are some of the lessons in leadership. How do we lead businesses in this context? Now, I'm going to share with you 7 lessons in leadership, and they are really a lot to do with my own personal experiences in 40 years of corporate life, both with Unilever and, of course, more recently with Blackstone. And I'd be very happy to hear your comments and your own experiences around this. So let me start with these 7 lessons. And of course, I've tried to make it binary, because the only way to communicate messages is to make it binary. Life is never black and white. I've tried to make it black and white, only for the sake of making sure that I don't lose the essence of what I believe are mission critical as we deal with this new VUCA world. The first lesson is no growth, no future. Growth solves I mean, this is a very wise saying. Growth solves most problems. More growth solves the rest. Growth is the elixir of every single activity, whether it's an economic activity, a social activity, a public activity, or a private activity. Societies need to grow, individuals need to grow, companies need to grow. However, there are dimensions to growth. While I believe in business, it should always be business as usual on growth. But at the same time, it must be business unusual on costs. And these are really two sides of the same coin, which is business as usual on growth and business unusual on costs. And the reason for that is that you've got to always ask yourself two questions. One, how do I grow my business, irrespective of the environment, the context, the macro that we operate in? And at the same time, am I prepared for the worst case scenario? Because we know stuff happens in this world. And it is this focus on business as usual on growth and simultaneously business unusual on costs that allows you to be prepared for both scenarios, the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. Every business needs to generate a surplus to be able to invest to grow the business. The second aspect of growth is innovation. Now, innovation is a much maligned word. Often we think of innovation as people who are sitting in these dimly lit rooms with their feet up on the couches and just staring out into the sunset. And the answer to that is, that's not what innovation is. In fact, the best definition of innovation was given by Clayton Christensen, the guru of innovation, who said, innovation is doing things differently that create value. And every organization needs to therefore innovate, not just on products and services, but also in terms of processes and the way we do things, the way we do operations and initiatives. And it is this broad definition of innovation that is critical. And in many ways, therefore, every organization needs poets, people who can think of new ideas and new products, but they also need farmers who know how to, be more productive, how to do things differently so they can get from the same piece of land more value. So the whole idea of value creation actually centers around innovation. And innovation is something that drives both growth and costs. Let me come to the second sort of lesson in leadership. Businesses must stay relevant to all stakeholders. And that brings me to really a very important dimension to growth. I've called this the 4G model when I was in Unilever. In the old times where people were focused on shareholders, and it was all about really consistent growth, quarter on quarter, competitive growth, better than others, and profitable growth, which is continuous improvement in operating margins. That was the model. It was what I call the 3G model. The world of Milton Friedman, and of course started by Adam Smith, in terms of capitalism and allowing businesses to do it the way they want to. I believe in today's world, there is a fourth G that is as important, if not most important. And that's the dimension of responsible growth. Business has to become part of the solution to society's problems. It cannot be part of the problem. And that is exactly the point I was making when I said people have mistrust about businesses. They don't trust business. They feel businesses are there only in their own self-interest. And good businesses today are focused around ensuring that not only do they grow, but they grow responsibly. And ESG is just one dimension of it. I look at ESG as something we are all checking in terms of boxes. Good businesses build responsible growth as part of their business model. And I'm reminded of Henry Ford's. This is the founder of Ford Motors, and he said, "Business is a service; it's not a bonanza." And in fact, many years later, Mr. J.R.D. Tata said the same thing. The purpose of business is to serve society. And we forget, often we forget, that the only way businesses can thrive is in a community and society that thrives. You cannot have a thriving and prosperous business in a sick society. And I'm reminded of one of the ex-chairman of Unilever, who was a Dutch person. And we, as Unilever, were the first to start the maritime for sustainable fishing. At that time, we used to have a very sort of best-selling brand called Bird's Eye Fish Fingers. And he actually, when he was founding this whole sustainable fishing forum, said, no fish fingers. You cannot operate without being conscious of the world that you live in. So that's my second message to you. Stay relevant to all stakeholders. Have your ear to the ground in terms of not just shareholders, but your employees, the communities that you serve, your customers, and your consumers. Let me come to the third bit, which I think is going to be, is very binary and very controversial. According to me, the medium term is dead. You have to manage businesses in today's VUCA world for the long term and the short term. And what do I mean by that? Long term really matters when things are volatile. And why does it matter? Because when you are out there, going from point A to point B in a storm or navigating really rough waters, you have to be clear on the destination that you have set for yourself, which is the long term. But at the same time, you have to navigate the here and now, which is the short term. As far as the medium term is concerned, you have to learn to manage the business more dynamically. I always advise all the businesses where I'm a board member or I have the privilege of advising them, is you must always have rolling forecasts. This idea of saying, let's put together an annual operating plan, a 3-year plan, I'm not quite sure it's worth the paper it is written on. We can talk more about this. But the big message I want to give you, long term is important, and manage the business dynamically for the short term. So that brings me to my fourth lesson. And my fourth lesson is that speed is the new currency. Okay? What do I mean by that? Organize for outcomes. Organize for agility. Mark Twain once said, don't let school get in the way of education. What a great saying. Similarly, I would say, don't let organization come in the way of growth. We were all brought up in organizational models that were relics of the armed forces. Very hierarchical, very vertical. The time has come for us to think of horizontal organizations, which is what, for example, the founder of Blackstone often says. We need to have a horizontal culture, a non-hierarchical, outcome-oriented culture, where the definition of winning is common across the board. It's not a siloed organization. And that's important. The worst thing you can do in organization is to create matrices, okay? And create too many what I call interfaces. If you've traveled to the UK and the London Underground, when you arrive at a station, it says, mind the gap. You recognize that? Mind the gap. Organizations look for gaps in which you fill people whose job is to coordinate between one vertical and the other. That is not value adding. Okay? And the second bit of agility is execution. Strategy is execution, execution is strategy. There is an old Hindi saying, karne se hota hai. Karne se hota hai. You don't do, nothing happens. And agility is about doing things. It is, often we talk about, getting everything 100% perfect before we do it. In today's world, if you don't act quickly, the world is going to change. You'll be irrelevant to the world. Therefore, my advice to you is big picture matters, but pixels matter even more. Picture and pixels, strategy and execution. Speed is the currency. And that brings me to my fifth lesson in leadership. Every company now is a technology leader, is a technology company. Every company is either it's a creator of technology, or an enabler of technology or a user of technology. Every company. And the reason for that is that disruption and transformation is the new normal. And in order for you to transform your business, you need technology. And if you do not use technology, the ability to make decisions, right decisions, fast decisions go away. For me, data and technology is an enabler to faster decision making in a business. And that's critical again. And that brings me to the sixth lesson, which I think got sort of underscored very strongly during the COVID times. And that is, caring is a competitive advantage. Caring is a competitive advantage. And what do I mean by that? There are two dimensions to caring for your people. The first dimension is ensuring that you are constantly training and upskilling your people and your employees to be relevant in today's context, because the world is changing. And I call that renewing your license to operate. I'll give you an example. I spent my entire career in Unilever, in Hindustan Lever to start with. And I was a marketeer by training. But I can tell you today, I have no license to operate as a marketeer, because where people buy, how people buy, what people watch, which are critical to any marketeer, has changed completely. And I don't have the license to operate unless I train for it. And therefore, renewing people's license to operate is mission critical. And the second dimension to caring is the dimension of safety and well-being. COVID actually brought this out very sharply. As one of my old key competitors in one of their advertising used to say, you don't get a second chance to make, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. It's very important. Times of COVID, times of crisis are times where you can demonstrate to your employees that you genuinely care. And companies that are coming out of COVID, having demonstrated that they were willing to go that extra mile for their employees, are going to get a bunch of very loyal employees. We talk about talent and the war for talent. It's real. But I can tell you, war for talent is not won on the basis of offering a paycheck. War for talent is as much a war of the mind as it is of the heart. Winning the minds and hearts both of our employees is critical. Therefore, please remember, caring is definitely a competitive advantage. And finally, I come to what is perhaps the most important aspect of managing businesses, which is leadership matters. Often there are lots of definitions given on what a role of a leader is. And for me, there's a simple role. Leaders have really two jobs that they have to do. Number one, great leaders give energy. They give energy to the organization. You know, how many of us know examples where you had a person who you worked for, who walked into the room and filled the room with energy, and you came out of it saying, ye to ho sakta hai. On the other hand, there are leaders and people we've worked for who walk into the room and suck energy out of you. Be the leader that gives energy. And the second aspect, the second role of a leader is to manage the reputation of the company. We all talk a lot about what great leaders do, the vision they create, the direction they give, the strategic choices they present. But what people don't talk about is that great leaders also talk about things that they will not do. The non-negotiables, they are as important. And in many ways, therefore, the new model of leadership is being purpose-driven and values-led. Because giving people a larger sense of purpose actually unleashes energy in an organization. I didn't work in Hindustan Lever or Unilever because we made soap. When I joined the company, I remember Dr. Ranjan Banerjee, who was one of the, who came in as the HR director after Dr. KS Basu. And he says, your job is not to sell soap. Your job is to save people's life by offering good hygiene. Now, you can say all this with a bar of soap, but that's true. Number two, whether you sell soap or soup or sell industrial machines or services, it's how you conduct the business that builds your reputation, and therefore purpose-driven and values-led. That's the new form of leadership. This is not about standing on a pulpit and lecturing people about how great you are. Being accessible, being inclusive, being purpose-driven, being values-led, that's the new model of leadership. And that really then brings me to the summary of what I've talked about, the 7 lessons. The first is growth, growth, and growth. The second is the importance of responsible growth, the fourth dimension of this 4G. Managing the business more dynamically for the short term, even as you are anchored in the long term. Speed and agility is critical in a VUCA world. Every company is a technology company. You have to embrace technology. Caring is a competitive advantage. And purpose-driven and values-led leadership is what is going to take you to the other side. And that, in ending, I want to talk about Jim Collins' famous book, which all of you, I'm sure, have heard of, and most of you have read. And he talked about this book called From Good to Great. And with all due apologies to Jim Collins, I'm going to paraphrase that. In the new world, you don't go from good to great. You go from great to good. You have to be an organization, you have to lead an organization that is great in terms of performance and financial results, but is also good for the society that it serves. Thank you very much for giving me a hearing. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Dr. Patkar, any comments?
There are others raising their hand, which we will come in a moment. I'll just say one thing that I have over the years heard lots of speakers speak about what's required, leadership, turbulent world, and all that. These are common words to use. But after a long time, I heard somebody speaking original thoughts, put into original words, put into, as I've said in my inaugural introduction, in a manner that is succinct, clear. I think Dr. Basu would have been proud about the words Harish Manwani used, because he made it so simple in being able to distill the wisdom and put it across in a manner that you can relate to in simple terminology. I think that was the single most important takeaway for me. I made note after a very long time. I made notes of what the speaker was saying, and I'm sure it's going to be wanting to share this with lots of people as time goes by. Thank you very much.
Harish, you made us a second time, you made a great impression again.
Thank you.
Kitty,
good to see you.
Kitty,
can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Harish, can you just tell, how you see India's, initiatives in the leadership in business world, that we have proved that we are good in IT, in IT, we have come out, tops. But, again, being a marketeer, how do you really see the change that is taking place in the marketing environment today?
So, I don't think India is about IT. I think if you look at the success that Indian leaders have achieved both in India and outside India, it's absolutely remarkable. And I think the quality that, at least it is my perspective, the quality that Indian leaders bring and Indian managers bring is the ability to manage uncertainty. Because we are so used to managing, volatility and uncertainty. Think of our own youth. You were always trying to somehow manage to get there. You know what I'm saying? Nothing comes on a platter here.
Very true.
And number two, very important. When you grow up in India, you grow up in diversity. No one has to train you about diversity. In your schools and your colleges, everyone came from different backgrounds and we were comfortable with each other. And that then allows you to adapt to environments that are totally different or environments that are constantly changing. So I am a great fan of Indian leaders, both in India and outside India.
Fabulous.
Thank you. May I ask a question, please?
Of course.
It's a wonderful thing you have spoken, Mr. Manwani. I have a small question. Question is, what role leaders play in creating a culture in the organization? Because culture is very infective. That is the number one. Number two, in especially public sectors and the government organizations in India, what do you look at the leaders' role to create a reformation so that they become much more service-oriented?
Yeah. So the second question is really easier. Whether you are a public sector or a private sector, as long as you are held accountable for your actions, okay? Like I said, the purpose of business is to serve. Public sector is in a much better place to live that. But if you can't serve, if you think you are entitled because you happen to be a boss or you happen to be a senior person, that's not a culture either in a public or a private company. So I leave that aside. What was your first question? I'm sorry. At my age, I forget all this sometimes.
Yes, what role leaders play in creating a positive culture in an organization?
Yes, that's a very good question. And I would say I'll go back to what I said is the role of a leader. And to many ways, that's part of the culture. The culture you create is one of giving. Leaders do 2 or 3 things. Firstly, and very importantly, leaders are accessible. Okay? If you're not accessible, you're not a leader. The best definition of a leader is that leaders have followers. If you don't have followers, you're just taking a walk. So occasionally you got to look back and ask yourself, आपके पीछे कोई है कि नहीं है कि आप अकेले ही जा रहे हैं? There are lots of leaders who are pace setters, who are very bright. They know the answers to all problems. Okay? They don't need anybody. But when you work for people like these, they don't ask questions. They give you solutions. They don't develop you. So great leaders have followership. And followership comes out of being accessible, inclusive. And secondly, what I said, give energy to people. When you walk into a room, your job is to give energy. Good times, bad times. The true test of a great leader is adversity. I can be a great leader when things are going well. What's the big deal? You know, sab kuch acha chal raha, you also go and give a good lecture and everyone's happy. Adversity brings out leadership. So you have to make sure that you give energy to the organization, support the organization. Okay, that's important. And finally, values. Values, values, values. If you don't have non-negotiables in an organization, you don't create a great culture. Okay, I can tell you in Hindustan Lever, I can vouch for this. I never had to call my boss or to refer to an operating manual to decide what was right or wrong. The values I lived with are no different from the values I was brought up in my middle class home. That's culture. The culture, what I call the soul of a middle class, that's what we are all brought up to do. And as long as you follow that principle of giving energy, being inclusive, creating non-negotiables, you'll be a great leader, create a great culture.
Appreciate your answer very much. Very good. Thank you.
Right. Hi. Mr. Manwani's talk has been extremely stimulating and thought-provoking, and his responses are so crystal clear that I think there's a whole lot of people wanting to ask questions. But just to keep ourselves abreast with the time that we have, all my senior colleagues out here, please don't mind if I play the timekeeper. So may I just request Mr. Solanki to unmute himself and ask his question.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Good evening to you, sir, Mr. Manwani, sir.
Good evening.
It was so educative and inspiring to listen. And I thought we all will lose an opportunity if I don't ask you that as an ecosystem, in its broadest sense, the society, the schooling, the college, the B schools, and the corporates, are we really there to induce, grow the kind of mindset that you are talking about? And if there is more to be done, I think you, sir, are the best person to speak about it.
Well, obviously, none of us have all the solutions. We have to recognize this. But my view, and I'm a eternal optimist, is that the underlying values of India are middle class values. What is the definition of middle class? Definition of middle class is that we always aspire for our next generation to be a little bit better. We are very competitive, but we want to compete fairly and squarely. We are very competitive. You will not get admission to a college. You won't get a place in your tickets for a cinema hall ticket. Nothing if you don't try hard. But that's what you learn to, in the middle class values is about saying, go out there, compete, but compete fairly. And as long as we keep the values of competitiveness and fairness as two sides of the same coin, winning is not everything, but winning fairly and squarely is everything. That's all I have to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, sure. Thank you so much, sir. Very inspiring.
Please, Mr. Bigyan Verma.
Hi, good evening. Manwani sir, absolutely brilliant talk. I just have a very, I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but according to Fortune 500, the average age of companies have gone down substantially in this VUCA world, right? So do you think the leaders also, the effectiveness of the leaders will also go down substantially in the years to come as such?
Both leaders and companies have to stay relevant. Remember my lesson number 2, stay relevant. If you don't stay relevant to the communities and the societies and you lose touch, companies will go bust and leaders will no longer be relevant. Think about it. When we were all growing up, there were different kinds of leaders in different times. Today, that leadership style that maybe I had is not relevant anymore. And the leadership time before me was relevant for its time is not relevant now. When one of the reasons why I still continue to work is so that I can still be in touch with a lot of young leaders. And they are very different from the way I was brought up. They are very non-hierarchical. They have no hesitation in calling you and seeking your help if they want it. And if they don't want it, they will not call you. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, you have to remain relevant. And good leaders constantly are in touch with what's happening around them. I always believe that change doesn't come upon us suddenly. Change is very gradual, actually. Change is happening somewhere in some corner of the world or some corner of the country, which we tend to ignore. So my advice to everyone, whether you are a leader or you're a company, always look for that change that you think is very niche change that is happening. Because one day that niche will become the change that will determine the world. So remain relevant is all I can say. And if you're not relevant, have the grace to withdraw and let the company being run by people who understand that better.
Thank you so much, sir.
And that's a tough one to digest when one has to really do it, I think. But that's the call that one has to take to get out of the way.
Yeah, but let me just add on that one. Professional organizations have always believed in this, which is no individual is greater than the company. No individual. Okay. I may have been whatever in Unilever, Hindustan Lever, but there are better people now running Hindustan Lever and Unilever. And that has to be the principle. No individual is greater than the company.
Very true. Dr. Kiran, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I said Mr. Devendra Singh, I think he had raised his hand to ask a question. Would he like to unmute himself and ask, or?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it goes without saying it's a fantastic conversation going on. I'd like to have a question. So, during your presentation, you made a point about inequality in society, especially bottom of pyramid. Do you think that are we, probably corporates, government, individuals, putting efforts in right direction? I would request your suggestion on this.
Yeah. So I was not talking about bottom of the pyramid in terms of the opportunity. I was talking about inequality and inequity, which creates tension in a society. You know, I'm as much a believer in free enterprise, okay, as anybody else. But at the end of the day, sometimes we forget the dimension of responsibility. If you actually run your business and you are responsible to the societies you serve, you will have a longevity of your company, you will last longer, and importantly, you'll make money. It's not about making money. My worry only is that.
Can I call you back?
My only concern is that if you live in a society where there is so much disparity, you will always have what I call societal tensions. And that is never good for businesses, nor is it for individuals, nor is it for countries. So we have to be conscious of that.
Right.
Thank you.
We have with us today several of the past presidents of BMA, and I'm sure they have a lot of inputs to give us here. So may I go simply by seniority and request Mr. Ernest Fernandez to
You're on mute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manwani, for a very insightful talk. I was only wondering that what do you think should be the relationship between business and government? Because in India, we see that whereas businesses in terms of their management have progressed to world standards, we often find that dealing with government leads to a lot of issues, which in fact drives many of our younger talented people to go abroad and manage companies abroad when they should be in India.
Well, thank you for that question. I was brought up in a company at a time where everything was regulated. There was price control. The capacity that you used was controlled. The amount of oil that you used for your soap making was controlled. So a lot of controls were there, including, by the way, in order to become to retain a majority shareholding, you had to have 60% of your turnover in what they call core sector and so on. So I think, one has to accept the fact that in a developing country, you will always be regulated because there is always a danger of going off the track. I'm not carrying a torch for the government. All I'm saying is, I know it's frustrating. The only thing I would say is the problem is not regulation. The problem is transparency in enforcing regulation. Everywhere there are regulations, by the way, okay? Antitrust regulations, a plethora of regulations. But it is a transparency of regulations that are important. If you have a transparent system, people feel more comfortable. They're frustrated, but they learn how to deal with it, and it works. So I would only say that the price that we have to pay for being a developing country, which is on its way to becoming a developed country, is that we have to learn to live with regulation. But let us hope that the government also is very transparent and open about what kind of regulations so that people can move on rather than getting stuck in treacle. So that would be my only thing. I per se, I'm not a believer that we are going to move to a society where there will be no regulations or very few regulations. I think if anything, expect more regulations generally across the world.
Thanks. May I invite Mr. Indrapal Singh to...
Thank you, Kiranji. All that I can say, it's a very fascinating talk. And Harishji, you have turned the leadership lessons conventionally known to upside down, and kind of one can argue that this is a new model, which is 180-degree opposite of what generally goes around. And perhaps extremely relevant for the governments and the large public organizations to take lessons from. But I would like to know one aspect of Hindustan Lever, which is very remarkable in the sense that it's a factory for producing very successful CEOs. So what are the things that you do, few important things that you do that gives birth to so many competent top-level executives which are ruling the roost in FMCG space or other areas?
So thank you for that question. And I'm really proud of the fact that for generations, Hindustan Lever has retained its primacy as the employer of choice. And by the way, you should know this, that in many of the surveys, global surveys, like the Forbes Best Companies and so on, sometimes Hindustan Lever features. Unilever sometimes does not feature in the top 10. And you know, in many ways, that is the beauty of Hindustan Lever. So what is it that you do? You know, it's not rocket science. I would say attracting, developing, and retaining top talent is really what makes Hindustan Lever tick. But the answer is a little more complex in terms of how does Hindustan Lever attract or develop and retain talent? Firstly, it's a complete meritocracy. Hindustan Lever will never dilute the quality and the talent of people that it takes. I'll tell you, when I became the chairman, we were in the throes of a very major liberalization process in India, and everyone wanted to join investment banks and consultancies. And we suddenly realized that our model of training people, giving a management training for 1.5 years, sending them to villages to spend 8 weeks in the rural areas with villagers and understanding rural India and so on. People said, why should I do it? I want to join Goldman Sachs. I want to join McKinsey. I want to join one of these consultancies, and you know, so on. And I remember it was a tough choice at that time. And I personally went to every business school where we used to recruit from, and I said, Hindustan Lever will continue with the training that we have said. It's your choice. You want to join our training? We will train you to be comfortable in the dusty roads of rural India and to be equally comfortable in the corridors of Unilever House in London or Holland. But we are not going to give up our model. We want to bring you up as a grounded, rooted, and anchored Indian manager. That's what we believe in. This Dr KS Basu's model. That's what we are trying to build you. That's what we are here for. And do you know what? The people we attract, because we don't dilute our standard, but we also demand the same kind of rigor and training. Do you know that in Hindustan Lever, you cannot become a product manager without becoming a sales manager? Do you know that you cannot become a sales manager or even a accounts financial manager or a R&D manager without having spent time in the factories and in selling in the markets? Because we think that's important for us. So I think that, to my mind, is a model, number one. Number two is developing talent. We absolutely, long before it became famous, believed in continuous learning and constantly training people. at every level, from factory workers to our management people. Everyone spends X amount of time training. You know, this reminds me of that famous saying. I don't know how many of you read this book called Corporate Athletes. And it says, athletes spend 85% of their time training and 15% of their time performing. Corporate people spend 85% of their people performing and 15% of their people training. I'm saying Hindustan Lever did not have 85-15, but we certainly had 30-35% of people's time going in training them, developing them. So I was talking about the license to operate. I, as a senior leader in the company, had a 23-year-old mentor who taught me how to navigate the digital world. Okay, I have no idea. So that's what develops talent. And finally, you know, there is a difference between what I call employment and employability. We train people to also be employable. That's why, you know, you call us a great place for senior leaders to be developed. We don't mind, because we believe that that actually is important for a company's reputation. And therefore, employment and employability both are important. So that's, if you like, a word from the sponsors.
Say, I think this answer was as relevant and powerful as at least half of your talk, if I may say so, because this is really the doing. You said that caring has two dimensions, and first part was building capabilities and so on. And I suppose that is the secret. And I wonder whether many companies would spend that much money and time and investment into developing people so that they have a huge pipeline of very, very able people to lead the organization for decades to be the champion in their fields and so on. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think Mr. Manwani mentioned the point about renewing your license to operate.
Yeah,
I think that's the type of practice that probably Hindustan Unilever follows every year. I have some of my senior teachers waiting very patiently to ask questions. So I'm going to request Dr. Anand Patkar, followed by Dr. Anjana Grewal, to please unmute yourselves and ask.
I'll just take this opportunity, Kiran, to ask a question. I saw something over here when I looked at my notes, Harish. Among the trends, you said rise of inequality and inequity around the world. And on the lessons in leadership, staying relevant to stakeholders, all stakeholders, particularly a 4G thing, then perhaps there's a dichotomy over there. Because we are not being 4G relevant, therefore there is inequality and inequity. And perhaps that is what is leading to what you also call the increasing rise of tribalism and mistrust with globalization and whatnot. Are they? I mean, I thought they were all linked together. And if you can just confirm my understanding or elaborate, that'll be lovely.
Absolutely true. Absolutely. That's exactly it. Because staying relevant was a lesson in this context.
Absolutely.
Of rising inequality, tribalism, mistrust. Because people, I tell you what, let's face it. If you ask a common man what they think of the business, they will say in local colloquial, ye paisa banata hai. Hai ki nahi? I mean, simple. They don't say, oh my God, they're a responsible citizen, they do good work. I'm really so honored that I also have a chance to be associated with Tata Sons. Because Tata's, at least, you tell people about Tata's, they think the company also does some good. But generally, most companies people think are here to make money. So I think it's so relevant. You're absolutely right.
Can I speak up now? Okay. Harish, we really appreciate your session. It was very good. Okay. It was not from a textbook. And that was the best part of it. Things which are really not found anywhere, but we heard it, give energy. I think that was the best statement I've heard for a long time. And the second one, I think Anand Patkar has also said it, remain relevant. I think this business of remaining relevant, whether it's individuals, companies, is so very important that, I have a different terminology for it. I call it the S curve. I say you've always got to go up the S curve. You cannot, because things, they start going down, So you've got to remain above the S curve, whether it's your career, whether it's your business, anything. And that's it. So thank you very much for a very good session. Really, really, we are all proud to be Bajajites when we see you. Thank you.
And thank you, Anjana. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anjana, ma'am. May I request Mr. Ajit Gupte to unmute himself and...
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. See, I put a question. Are we capable of bringing manufacturing revolution? Because that's a hot topic. See, India requires employment, if you are to, and we have the opportunity. But then, see, my experience is that when we go to the campuses for the interviews for the engineers, they said, oh, manufacturing, it's the last preference. They want to go to IT, have a nice laptop, nice environment to work. So how do you think that, are we capable of bringing manufacturing revolution, which is I think is, we have the opportunity, but we don't have, a willingness to do it.
I have to respectfully disagree. When you have 1.3 billion people, you will always have enough people who love being engineers, who love being doctors, who love being accountants, who love being this. So I think we should allow water sometimes to find its own level. Okay. And let's not forget that people may not necessarily want to work. All of them may not want to work on the shop floor, but still the most, some of the most positions people aspire for is to join the IITs and so on and so forth. So it's not that people have anything against engineering. I think it's just a question of the opportunities that present themselves. Like today, I serve on a couple of boards in California. And I can tell you, it's such a pleasure to see Indians, you know what they are doing? They're doing engineering. Of course, they're writing code. Some of them are in hardware, some of them are in software, but they are engineers. But because the opportunities are big and they're getting paid for it, they like working there. So my point really is, at the end of the day, with 1.3 billion people, we have no dearth of people who would want to do all kinds of jobs. And finally, on manufacturing, I would say that India needs and has the capability of generating employment of all kinds because of our sheer size and scale of our country. Can you imagine a country of the size of China or US, which is what we are at the end? Those are our comparables, saying, we only want to be in this business. If you take the China model, the fact that they became a supplier to the world at the end of the day may not be exactly what everyone wants to be. Okay. Similarly, I think from our point of view, it's great we've got an IT base. Excellent. We've got to be world-class in a few things, but we can also be good in so many other things. We don't have to be world-class in everything. So my point is, we have enough capabilities, enough talent, enough manpower. What we really need is institutions of higher learning that are able to impart good education. My view, I don't have enough. I don't believe we have enough of those. I think the number of engineering colleges, quality engineering colleges, medical colleges, we need many, many, many more of them. And then you will see people want to work as engineers.
Thank you for that, Mr. Manwani. I think we have another 10 minutes. So if there's any question, I think Trupti Sahu had raised her hand. If Trupti is still around, does she want to ask a question? Please unmute yourself and go ahead. Yeah, I think that's the floor is. Yes,
Professor
sure.
Kiran, can I?
Sure, go ahead.
Mr. Manwani, thank you so much for such an enlightening session. And I just wanted to ask you that in this VUCA world, when we are talking and pandemic has shown a new face of everything, your message to the small enterprise, because we have seen that, they have gone through a lot of tough time during this period. So to the leaders of small enterprise or the startups, any particular lesson which you would like to pass on?
No, I would say, Rajesh, that I totally agree with you. I think the pain of the pandemic has been unevenly sort of spread across either the underprivileged classes or the small enterprises. And I would only say that I hope that the government has done enough. I don't really know enough, so I will not comment on it, but I hope they've done enough. As they did for the welfare schemes for individuals, I hope they've done enough for businesses. And at the end of the day, small businesses, as you probably know as well as I do, depend a lot on large businesses to survive. Okay. So, in many ways, this world is so interdependent and interlinked. And I feel more confident as I now see the opening up that as businesses begin to, come back, small businesses will begin to thrive. But there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that not just in India, but even in places like the United States, the core muscle of the economy is small businesses. There is no question.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Kalpesh Parmar, would you like to unmute yourself? And
Thanks, Mr. Yadav. Hi, Harish. Good to see you. Maybe a decade ago, when you were with us in Nigeria, in Unilever, you had said 3 words, mood, margin, and market share. Correct. I know it's a very African context because what you wanted from us during those days. So just tell us a bit more about that, and maybe you have a few more M's to add to that, the 3 M's, and then we can implement it from tomorrow onwards. Thank you, Harish. Always a pleasure to hear you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Kalpesh. Good to see you. No, I mean, the 3 M's was in a particular context. People create a lot of complicated dashboards and scorecards to review the business. It was in that context that when I was the global CEO of the company, when I used to visit a country, I always said, before you start your presentation, I need to do 2 things. Number 1, I need to spend half a day visiting the market to understand consumers and customers. Half a day I want to spend visiting consumers. I want to visit homes to see how they use the products. And then in the morning, next day, I want you to present the business, but in the first slide, before you give me the detail, I want to know 3 M's. Tell me what your market share is. Because you may be growing 10%, but if the market is growing 15%, you're a bad performer. I used to go to Europe. And in Europe, I would say, what are you growing by? And they say, I'm growing 2%. And the market is flat. I said, that's a great performance because you're outperforming the market. So you're gaining market share. So I would say, before you show me your numbers, show me your market shares. China, if you're not growing at 15%, I'm not interested. Because markets are growing at 17, 18% in those days. Second was a margin. Anyone can grow the business. If you give it away free, I mean, it reminds me of that Dennis the Menace cartoon where he is selling lemonade for $1 while the neighbor is selling it for 1 cent. So someone says, why are you selling it for $1? He says, I know all I have to do is sell 1 glass, and I'll be done. Similarly, at the end of the day, anyone can get you a top line growth and market share, but you need to do it by also making sure that you can continuously improve your margins. And the third was mood. And mood was about the engagement of the employees. You can be whipping your employees into action and not treating them well. And we had engagement scores. We used to do these engagement surveys every year. So I say, show me these three things: market share, margin, and mood of the business. Are people happy? Are they engaged? And that's the model. And I still believe in it, by the way, Kalpesh. I mean, wherever I go, I ask them these three questions. I may not call it 3 M's, but I definitely call it those three things: market share, margins, and mood.
Thank you, sir. Pleasure.
Operator's guide.
Right. Mr. Manwani, if I may just ask you a question, I think since most of them had an opportunity. You mentioned that one of the principles is to stay relevant, responsible growth, and being part of the solution.
Yeah.
You also said that you cannot have a thriving business if you have a sick society. No fish, no fish fingers. Now, in a business that one starts and one needs to establish, okay, how do you do this balance and trade-off between being responsible in growing as well as making sure that you survive and thrive? What would be the tips that,
again, very, very good question, Kiran. But I would say that there is no trade-off, because it is the cost of doing business now to do it in a responsible way. I'll give you a couple of examples. About 10 years ago, we decided, as part of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, we had something called a sustainable plan, that 100% of all the raw materials, agricultural raw materials that we will source, will be from certified sustainable sources. Just to give you an example, at that time, we were sourcing 7 million tons of raw materials across the world, from palm oil, to foods and fruit and vegetables for our Knorr brands across the world, and so on. And we decided that palm oil is something that was being, large producers of palm oil are in Indonesia and Malaysia. And we wanted to make sure that we were getting it from certified sustainable sources. In other words, their practices were sustainable and they were paying a fair wage. And in order to do so, we had to start by paying a premium, because a lot of the suppliers, the big companies who were supplying palm oil, were not producing certificates for sustainable sourcing. And therefore, we paid a premium. Very soon, because we were leading the pack, our competitors said, I hope this doesn't become a competitive disadvantage, that Unilever is using sustainable palm oil and we are not. So very soon, we could form what we call the Forum for Sustainable Palm Oil Sourcing, where suppliers came in, our competitors, I call these competitors peers now, came in, and the whole industry took an initiative to change to sustainable palm oil. And these are just small examples. This is cost to doing business. Someone has to lead, and then everyone follows. If you tell me that I want to make, I'll give you an example. Less is more. So it is always not a bad idea to be be sustainable. Give you an example on packaging. The less packaging you use, the less expensive it is. I mean, logic, less is more. So in all our products, we started designing products in a manner that we were using less packaging. It became more sustainable. And at the same time, it was saving us costs. So I gave you two examples, one where cost went up and one where the cost went down. But the main lesson I want to give you is, if you lead, others will follow you, and it is the cost of doing business. And now, by the way, palm oil, sustainably sourced certified palm oil, is available at the same cost as it used to be, which was non-certified and non-sustainable. You're mute. You're on mute.
No. So it's a strength of conviction that one does business with. I have another small question, if I may. One is that a good leader's role is to give energy. And the second one you said is to manage the reputation of the company. Okay. So how does one, as a leader, where does he extract his energy from? And two, when you say manage reputation, how would you elaborate on managing reputation?
So the energy is given from the same people, that is received from the same people that you give energy. I don't know. I'm sure all of us have worked in environments where you feel good about being with people because they're giving you such positive energy because you've given them energy. So it's a give and take. And number two, a lot of us, of course, the job of a leader sometimes can get a bit lonely. And that is why what you need is real friends and good family. I don't mind telling you, I don't spend my free time trying to socialize with business people all the time. I don't. I spend with my old college friends. If I could have a drink with Anand Patkar today, I would prefer that than to go and meet a business associate. Why? Because it gives me energy to be with him. He's my old friend, my old buddy. So these are things that are important. You have to charge yourself because you are human. Be yourself. Okay? And that's important. Your second thing was, give us examples of reputation. Remember, in today's world, it takes you a long time to build a reputation. It takes a click of a mouse on the internet to destroy your reputation. Therefore, creating non-negotiables. What do I mean by that? If you are doing business, sometimes a deal looks very attractive or a shortcut looks very inviting. Okay? Don't do it. Once you do it, you'll always have to do it. I'll give you an example. I don't mind sharing because it was a long time ago. I was a young manager in the company and we were setting up a new plant, a new site in one of the upcountry locations. And in order for us to get a particular license to progress the work, there was a sense that someone needs to, give facilitating payments and all that. And obviously, this is not the culture of the organization. And that evening, I rang up my boss. And I told him this is what's happened and so on. And he told me, he said, never ever call me again because I'll sack you if you ever ask me questions like these. You know the answer. Just go and do what you would normally do. And that's, to my mind, was the answer. Once you decide you don't want to succumb to this, people stop asking you. You can do good business in any part of the world as long as you don't succumb to this. Once you do it, that's reputation. Then people know that ye to aise hi kaam karte hain. By the way, the project got delayed by about 3 or 4 months. Of course, it doesn't matter. Got delayed. That's the cost of doing good business. Again.
Good. Thank you so much for giving us the very clear ideas. I think I'm not going to hold you any further between you and Anand to have your drink tonight. So I would request our President, Dr. Kavita Laghate, to please come in and propose the vote of thanks to such a wonderful, elaborate audience that we've had today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kiran Yadav, incoming Vice President for BMA. And thank you, Mr. Manwani. It was great listening to you. My apologies, I could not join in the beginning on screen, but I was there from the beginning. I'm sure this collaboration with Dr. KS Basu, Managerial Excellence Trust, and Bombay Management Association is going to give similar kind of inputs to all who are going to be with us on these memorial lecture. Dr. KS Basu is a common factor between Bombay Management Association and Jamnalal Bajaj Institute of Management Studies. And the trustees of the trust were very clear about the leadership lessons that were learned from Dr. KS Basu. We should have someone. Thank you for agreeing and accepting our invitation to speak for this Dr. KS Basu Memorial Lecture. And I am sure your thoughts, which you have shared with us today, will go a long way with all these young students who have joined today to listen to. And may I also tell that this will be available on the Bombay Management Association's YouTube channel also. Thank you, Mr. Manwani, for those very clear instructions, kind of learnings you have given us. And it is going to be a path breaking and light for all of us to lead, because as you know, everyone nowadays is a torchbearer for themselves, and they will be really making great for themselves as well as for our country too. My thanks are due to all former presidents of Bombay Management Association, Indrapalji, Ernest Fernandez sir, Chaya madam was also there, and all others who have joined. Colleagues from academia, many of them I can see, Anita Shanbag madam, and from other institutes also. Thank you very much for being with us. Tomorrow, as you know, the last Wednesday of a month, we celebrate Indian managers who made a difference. Tomorrow we have a very great personality, Mr. J.B. D'Souza. Traditionally, one will not call him a manager, but in government, in public service, the change that he has made will tell you why we need to celebrate him and why he is still relevant. Tomorrow, Principal Ellen Wellinger, Institute of Management students will be presenting. I am sure you all will join tomorrow at 6 o'clock for the last day of the events that we hold in Bombay Management Association for this month of March. Do join us at 6 o'clock tomorrow, and thank you very much for joining. Mr. Manwani would like to meet you sometime in person in JB or in Bombay Management Association's office. You are most welcome. If you are of this side of the world, let us know. We will be very honored to have you in JBIMS as well as in BME. Thank you.
It'll be a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
So I think that brings us to the end of the session. Good evening, good morning to those who have logged in from across the globe, and stay well, stay healthy. See you soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Kiran. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. My pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.